So if you haven't watched the CMYK intro or you don't understand CMYK, I highly recommend you go and watch the video CMYK intro that I made, which basically just has a quick introduction to how you can understand the CMYK gamut and how you can learn it if you're not comfortable with it. But let's move forward with as if we understood the CMYK gamut here. So I'm going to introduce Channel Mixer. And again, I'm in CMYK, so this tool will pertain to the CMYK gamut. Now, just looking at the red on these Jordan 1s here, I just know by looking at it, okay, red in CMYK gamut is made up of magenta, yellow, and in this case, maybe it has a little bit of cyan and a little bit of black in it because it is kind of a dark red. So that's kind of just me looking at an image, knowing, okay, this is my guess of what the CMYK breakdown is. And I could probably even say, like, maybe it's got, like, 100% magenta, like 80% yellow, like 10% cyan, and like maybe 5% black or something. And who knows what it exactly is. But that's just like a quick, my like guess at it. And again, like a way I can cheat and see like the channels is by going into my channels palette here. So when I click in my channels palette, and again, if it's not showing, if you don't have this toolbox open, you can go to Window and Channels. But I can double click on, I could also, I'm just going to zoom in here so you can kind of see these thumbnails. You know, basically the red you can see like doesn't have a lot of cyan. Anything that is in like a dark color here means that that's like the color that it's made up of. So this is like black on the magenta layer. That means there's like 100% magenta basically, and cyan is almost white, so maybe there's a low percentage. And yellow is kind of this dark gray, and again, I'm just going to zoom in. It's a tiny thumbnail or whatever, but I'm also going to show you you can click on these. So I'm going to like click on cyan, and again, you can see in this red area there's very little there's very little color at all as cyan in that portion of the image. But then if I click on magenta, and again, quick keys, it actually tells you right here to cycle through them, command 4 or 5, whatever. So it does have, this is like black. So when it's black, that means it's like 100% of the color. When it's white, that means it's like 0% of the color. So there's like 0% magenta in this like base of the sneaker, but there's like 100% magenta in this area. So again, this is just cheating like to give you like a gauge of what colors you're starting with. And as you learn this tool, you'll need this less and less, and you probably won't even use this. But while you're learning, it's great to kind of see how your colors are broken down in the CMYK gamut. And again, I'm going to go to yellow because you can see this is pretty dark gray, which means there's a good amount of yellow in these areas. And even on the black of the sneaker, there's a good amount of yellow. And then the black, there's very little black. So again, that red that's made up of here is mostly magenta and mostly yellow, and a little bit of cyan and a little bit of black, because these aren't pure white, right? Like this is kind of pure white, but here's like a little bit of gray. So there's a small percentage of black in this. And again, that's how you kind of gauge the information that you're starting with, okay? So knowing that magenta is like 100% black, that is a slider in my channel mixer that I'm going to work with a lot. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to CMYK, and I'm going to go back to my layers, and I already have this selection in here, and I'm going to add a channel mixer. So when I have this channel mixer, the way that I affect colors is through the output channel. What I mean by affect colors, I mean if you want to add or subtract the color into the file, you go to the output channel and change to that. So if I wanted to add cyan into this to make it more purple, I would go into the cyan output channel and add information there. And if I want to take out a color, I would take it out from whatever output channel. So if I want to like make this less red, maybe I'm taking out magenta, then I would go to the magenta output channel. And I'm just going to demonstrate that really quickly. So if I want to make this less red, again, there's magenta and yellow is making up these colors. So I go to the magenta channel and I just drag that down, and you can see it's almost yellow. And again, there was a small percentage of cyan in there and a small percentage of black, so it's almost like this greenish yellow. It's not perfect, but just by going into the magenta output channel and dragging down the magenta slider, I've changed the color a lot on this. And again, I'll add it back just so you can see. Now, when I say the information you're starting with in channels, that's the sliders you want to work with. These are sliders. That's what I mean. So because magenta had like 100% of magenta, this slider I can use to affect the color in any of these output channels. So let's say I want to turn this purple. I'm actually going to take out yellow, but keep in mind that any one of these output channels that has information in it, so if there is even a little bit of yellow or a little bit of black, when I go to that output channel and I want to take it out, I'm going to take it out of that slider first. Okay, so like let's say I go to black and it's at 100% black, but we knew there wasn't a lot of black in here to begin with, so just pay attention to these colors. When I take out the black, you know, it takes out like the shading basically, right? It doesn't really do a overall color sweep. It takes out some of the depth of this color. I'm gonna hit Command Z just to go back. So there's not a ton of black, especially in these front ones. In the back one where it's shaded, watch what happens to these areas when I take out the black. And again, I'm doing that from the black slider because that's the actual black information that's in it. You know, and that's it. Just kind of taking black out of it. But I don't want to take black out. I want to make this like a purple. So I want to take yellow out. And I'm going to go to yellow in my output channel here. And then I'm going to drag the yellow out. And now that leaves me with, going back to my layers. And each time you drag any of these, actually it does affect these, the channels is what's visible on your screen. So like even I changed now, so these values are actually changing. Now you can see there's no yellow in this thumbnail. Where previously that was like a dark gray, now there's no yellow. But I wanted to make it purple, so I took out yellow, but purple also has some cyan, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to add some cyan. Now, the confusing part about this tool is that you're dealing with output channels that are CMYK, right? Cyan, magenta, yellow, black, but you're also dealing with sliders that are CMYK. So the thing you really need to remember is that these sliders are not changing that color necessarily. They're more just like information sliders, and really changing the colors is done through the output channels. So if I want to add or subtract cyan, which I want to add now, I go to my cyan output channel. I can't just go to like my magenta channel and add cyan there, because you can see that's only adding magenta, right? Whatever output channel I'm in, that's the only color I can control with any of these sliders. And all the sliders are giving me a lot of information to work with or a little information to work with. And again, that all stems back to what you started with. So I know the magenta slider, no matter which one of these output channels I use it in, the magenta slider has a lot of information. So when I go to cyan, to add cyan, I know that magenta channel had a lot of information. So you can see when I pump that up in the cyan output channel, it really makes it like purpley rather than just magenta. And I can make it like, you know, a darker purple. You know, you can see this is kind of like a really like bluish purple. And if I think I want less magenta, I'll just go back to the magenta channel, output channel, and drag down the magenta. And then it can be like a really like cool kind of bluish purple. But I'm going to actually, anytime you're doing any of these effects on any of these adjustment layers, there's this little rewind key basically where you click that and it goes back to before you made any changes. So I'm going to click that and it just goes back to red. So again, if I want to maybe change this to like an orange color, I'll go to my magenta output channel, which I'm still on, and take a little magenta out because it had some yellow in it. And that is like, you know, starting to get to an orange, but it didn't have a ton of yellow in it to begin with. It had a good amount, but if I want to go back again, magenta, that slider has a lot of information. So I can go to yellow and then use that slider to add some yellow. And then I have this nice orangey color. Okay, so that is basically the gist of this tool, but this is a really simple image to be working with. But again, that's the introduction to Channel Mixer, and we'll get more in depth for how you can really control other things with this tool as we go along. But that is the basics to this, and you know, again, it's all about understanding the CMYK gamut, and then it's all about remembering that anytime you want to add or subtract a color, you go into that output channel to add or subtract it, and then the slider you use depends on, you know, and I'm going to just go back to the beginning where it was red. It depends on the information in the channels that you started with. So again, like, you know, if I hide the, or if I just double click on any of these, oh, sorry, this is not working right now. I'm going to take that channel mixer off. But if I like hide these other channels, and you can see, you know, once I have that, then I can cycle through with my quick keys, Command 4, Command 3, just to see, again, like there was no cyan, there was a lot of magenta, you know, yellow, there's a good amount, and then black a very little bit. So again, wherever you start with here, whatever is the blackest value of whatever you're trying to change, that's the sliders that you're going to affect. And even if it has like, you know, this much value, that's good, because not everything is going to be black. Sometimes colors are made up of like a bunch of values that are just different, like grays, and they're never like 100% of a color. That's basically, if it's 100% black, that means there's 100% magenta in it. And if there's like this like 60 or 70% like yellow, that means there's like 70% like yellow making up that color. So if you're breaking down that CMYK, it's like 70 yellow, 100 magenta, and then, you know, whatever small percentages of cyan and black. Okay, so that's that, and again, we'll get more in depth with this tool in other tutorials.